The great hall of the Galactic Council stretched for miles in every direction. Thousands of alien beings filled the massive space, their voices creating a strange music of clicks, hums, and sounds that humans had no words for. At the center of it all, Ambassador Lisa Carter stood alone at a small podium, looking tiny against the enormous chamber around her. Lisa had been Earth's top diplomat for 20 years, but nothing had prepared her for this moment. Above her head, holographic displays showed images of Earth and its people. The pictures looked so small and simple compared to the grand cities and massive ships of the alien worlds she could see on other screens around the room. Behind Lisa, Captain Jake Morrison stood perfectly still in his dress uniform. The Marine officer had fought in 3 wars on Earth, but he had never felt as outmatched as he did right now. His hand rested near his sidearm, though he knew the simple pistol would be useless here. Around them, aliens the size of buildings looked down. With what could only be described as amusement, the Krillian Empire's war chief Vexthara rose from her throne. She stood 12 feet tall, her body covered in black chitin that looked like armor but was actually her skin. 4 arms ended in claws that could cut through steel, and her insect-like head held compound eyes that reflected the light like dark mirrors. When she spoke, her voice sounded like grinding metal. "So these are the humans," Vexthara said, her mandibles clicking with each word. "The newest species to crawl out of their little system and ask to join the civilized galaxy." Murmurs of laughter rippled through the chamber. Lisa felt her cheeks burn, but she kept her expression calm. She had dealt with difficult negotiations before, though never with beings who could tear her apart with their bare hands. A floating ball of blue light drifted down from the ceiling. As it approached, the light took on a more solid form, becoming a creature that looked like it was made of living energy. This was Zephyros of the Ethereal Collective, beings who had evolved beyond physical bodies millions of years ago. "Let us examine their military capabilities," Zephyros said, his voice echoing in their minds rather than their ears. As is proper for all species seeking council membership, the air above the chamber filled with new holograms. Lisa watched as images of human soldiers, tanks, ships, and aircraft appeared for all to see. She felt a moment of pride looking at the finest examples of human military technology, but that feeling quickly faded as she saw the reactions around her. The Aquarians, blue-skinned beings from the water worlds of the Kepler system, began making bubbling sounds that Lisa realized was laughter. Their gills fluttered with mirth as they pointed at images of human fighter jets with what appeared to be their version of fins. "Look at their flying machines," one Aquarian gurgled to another. "They still burn chemicals to move through the air." A member of the Silicon Brotherhood, a race of living rock creatures, rumbled with what might have been humor. "Their ground vehicles have wheels," he said, his voice like an avalanche. Actual wheels that touched the ground. But it was the weapons that drew the most ridicule. The holograms showed human soldiers carrying rifles, machine guns, and rocket launchers. To the aliens in the chamber, these devices looked like museum pieces from their own ancient histories. "Kinetic projectiles," Vexthara hissed with amusement. "They fire pieces of metal using chemical explosions." How wonderfully primitive. "Their largest weapons barely have the power of our personal defense systems," added a draconian representative, his scaled hide shifting color with his emotions. "My child's training weapon has more destructive capability than their biggest." Bombs. Captain Morrison's jaw tightened as he listened to the mockery. He had seen those weapons in action. He had watched human soldiers use them to protect cities and save lives. But here, surrounded by beings who could manipulate energy and matter with their minds, human military technology looked like Stone Age tools. Lisa cleared her throat and spoke into her translator device. "Honored members of the Council, humanity may be new to galactic civilization, but we have defended our world successfully for thousands of years. Our military has proven itself effective in protecting our people and our interests." More laughter filled the chamber. A creature that looked like a tree with eyes spoke in a voice like rustling leaves. Effective against what? Other humans with the same primitive weapons? Zephyros floated closer to the human delegation. "Ambassador Carter, your species shows promise in many areas. Your art, your literature, your capacity for growth. But militarily, you are centuries behind even the youngest council races." The floating being gestured, and new holograms appeared showing alien military technology. Weapons that fired beams of pure energy. Ships that could fold space around themselves. Soldiers wearing armor that could stop a nuclear explosion. "These are the tools of modern warfare," Zephyros continued. "Energy manipulation, gravity control, matter transformation. Your species still relies on Newton's laws and chemical reactions." Lisa felt the weight of thousands of alien eyes upon her. Some looked at her with pity, others with barely concealed contempt. A few seemed genuinely curious about this strange new species, but none looked impressed by humanity's military capabilities. War Chief Vexthara stood again, her claws clicking against her throne. "The Council will vote on humanity's classification. Given their technological limitations, I propose they be granted protected status rather than full membership." "Agreed," rumbled the Silicon Brotherhood representative. "They clearly need time to develop proper military technology before they can contribute meaningfully to galactic defense. Perhaps in a few hundred years," added the draconian delegate, "when they have learned to move beyond throwing rocks at their enemies." Lisa watched as the vote was called. Species after species agreed that humanity should be classified as a developing civilization, granted limited rights and minimal responsibilities. When the final tally appeared in the air above them, the result was overwhelming. Humanity would be given a small voice in council affairs, and would be expected to contribute only token forces to any military actions. As the session ended, and the aliens began to file out of the Great Hall, Lisa heard fragments of conversation in a dozen different languages. Most of it was about other matters, but she caught enough references to the primitive humans and their amusing weapons to know that Earth had become something of a joke among the galactic powers. Captain Morrison moved closer to her side as they prepared to leave. "Ma'am," he said quietly, "they have no idea what they're talking about." Lisa nodded, but said nothing. She was thinking about the reports she would have to send back to Earth, and wondering how humanity would prove itself worthy of respect in a galaxy that had already dismissed them as harmless primitives. Neither of them knew that they would get their chance to prove the galaxy wrong sooner than anyone expected. 3 months had passed since the humiliating council meeting, and now the deep space warning systems were screaming across the galaxy. On the monitoring station at the edge of the Helix Nebula, alien technicians stared at their screens in growing horror. The void swarm was coming, and it was bigger than anyone had feared. The creatures moved through space in ships that looked more grown than built. Their hulls were dark and organic, pulsing with veins of sickly light. Each ship seemed alive, breathing, and shifting as it traveled through the void between stars. The largest vessels were the size of moons, while smaller ones swarmed around them like insects around a hive. Back on Earth, General Patricia Hayes stood in the Pentagon's war room, watching the same terrifying images. The screens showed thousands of enemy ships moving toward inhabited space, consuming everything in their path. Entire star systems had gone dark as the void swarm passed through them. "How long do we have?" she asked the intelligence officer standing beside her. 6 weeks, maybe 7, came the reply. "They're moving faster than our projections suggested." General Hayes nodded grimly. 6 weeks to prepare for a war against an enemy that had destroyed civilizations far more advanced than humanity. She turned to Admiral Carlos Rodriguez, who had just entered the room. "Carlos, what's our status?" she asked. The Admiral looked tired. He had been working around the clock to prepare Earth's small contribution to the galactic defense. 3 battle groups ready for deployment. The UNS Endeavour, UNS Defiance, and UNS Liberty are fully operational. We've got about 15,000 personnel total. Against an enemy that just wiped out the Centauri system, General Hayes muttered. The aliens still think we're just playing at being soldiers. Admiral Rodriguez pulled up the deployment orders on his tablet. They've assigned us to the rear guard positions. Escort duty for supply ships and refugee evacuation. Nothing that might actually affect the outcome of the battle. The irony wasn't lost on either of them. Humanity's military was considered so weak that the Galactic Council wouldn't even risk putting them in real combat positions. They were being treated like security guards, while the real warriors handled the serious fighting. Across the galaxy, the alien fleets were gathering at the rally point near the Helix Nebula. The sight was magnificent and terrifying at the same time. Krillian dreadnoughts, each one a floating city of weapons and armor, moved into formation alongside their smaller escort vessels. The ships were covered in gun turrets that could fire plasma bolts capable of cracking planets. The Ethereal Collective had formed massive constructs of living energy, beings of pure light that could tear apart matter at the molecular level. They floated through space like glowing angels, beautiful and deadly. Their weapons could unmake reality itself in small areas, turning enemy ships into nothing more than scattered atoms. The Aquarian fleet looked like schools of metal fish, their ships flowing through space in perfect formations. Their weapons fired streams of superheated water that could cut through the thickest armor. The Draconian vessels resembled great dragons with spread wings, breathing fire that burned hotter than most stars. Lieutenant Commander Amy Foster stood on the bridge of the UN's Endeavour, watching through the viewport as the human ships took their assigned positions at the back of the formation. Their 3 battle groups looked like toys compared to the massive alien vessels surrounding them. "Look at the size of that thing," said her navigation officer, pointing at a Krillian dreadnought. "Our entire battle group could fit inside their main hangar bay." Amy nodded, feeling very small and very far from home. The human ships were modern by Earth standards, but here they looked like ancient relics. Their armor was steel and ceramics, while the aliens used materials that could bend light and deflect energy. Their weapons fired bullets and missiles, while their allies wielded the fundamental forces of the universe. On the ground, Colonel Kevin Baker was preparing his Marines for what everyone expected to be a desperate last stand. His soldiers checked their rifles, machine guns, and rocket launchers with professional calm, but he could see the uncertainty in their eyes. They had trained to fight other humans, not cybernetic nightmares from the void between stars. "Listen up," Colonel Baker addressed his assembled troops. "I know what you're thinking. You're looking at our gear and comparing it to what the aliens have. Their weapons can vaporize a target from orbit. Ours fire chunks of metal using gunpowder." The Marines listened silently, their faces serious under their helmets. "But remember this," the colonel continued. "We've been fighting wars for thousands of years. We know how to adapt, how to survive, and how to win against impossible odds. These aliens have been relying on their fancy technology for so long, they've forgotten what real war looks like." Private Danny Wilson raised his hand. "Sir, what if? Our weapons can't even hurt these things?" Colonel Baker smiled grimly. "Then we'll find another way. That's what humans do. We improvise, we adapt, and we overcome. The aliens think we're primitive, but primitive doesn't mean useless." As the days passed, more reports came in about the approaching enemy. The Void. Swarm had swept through 3 more star systems. leaving nothing but empty space behind them. Their ships seemed to absorb energy attacks and grow stronger from them. Conventional weapons appeared to have no effect at all. The alien commanders grew increasingly worried as they studied the enemy's capabilities. War Chief Vexthara had expected a difficult battle, but the Void Swarm seemed almost unstoppable. Their ships adapted to every weapon used against them, learning and evolving with each encounter. On the Un's Liberty, Captain Ryan Torres reviewed the tactical data with his crew. The enemy ships were covered in some kind of living armor that could change its properties in real time. When hit with plasma, it became resistant to energy. When struck by particle beams, it learned to deflect them. It's like they're designed to counter every advanced weapon system in the galaxy, his tactical officer observed. Captain Torres stared at the data, something nagging at the back of his mind. The enemy seemed prepared for everything the galactic races could throw at them. Energy weapons, gravity manipulators, matter disruptors, reality warpers. The Void Swarm had an answer for all of it. But as he looked at the specifications for human weapons, Torres realized something interesting. All the enemy adaptations were focused on countering advanced technology. There was no mention of how they dealt with simple kinetic impacts, chemical explosives, or basic projectile weapons. Maybe, he thought, being primitive wasn't such a disadvantage after all. The stage was set for the greatest battle in galactic history, and humanity was about to discover that sometimes the oldest solutions were the most effective ones. The Void Swarm arrived without warning. One moment the space around the Helix Nebula was empty except for the waiting galactic fleet. The next moment, thousands of dark ships materialized from hyperspace, their organic hulls pulsing with alien life. The enemy vessels looked like they had been grown in some nightmare laboratory. Their surfaces writhed and moved, covered in what appeared to be living tissue. Tendrils reached out from the larger ships, connecting them to smaller vessels in a web of flesh and metal. The sight made even veteran alien warriors step back from their viewports in disgust. War Chief Vexthara stood on the bridge of her flagship, watching the enemy fleet take formation. Her 4 claws gripped the command rail as she gave the order to attack. All vessels open fire. Show these creatures the power of the Krillian Empire. The first wave of plasma bolts streaked across space, brilliant streaks of superheated matter that could melt asteroids. They struck the enemy ships in massive explosions of light and energy. For a moment, it seemed like the battle would be over quickly. The alien commanders allowed themselves to feel hopeful. Then the light faded, and the void ships were still there. Where the plasma had struck, the organic hulls were changing. The dark tissue was becoming reflective, mirror-like surfaces that absorbed the energy and redirected it. The second wave of plasma attacks bounced harmlessly off the enemy vessels, or was absorbed completely. Impossible, Vexthara hissed. Increase power to maximum. All batteries, continuous fire. But the result was the same. The more energy the Krillians poured into their attacks, the better the enemy ships became at defending against them. The living armor was learning, adapting, evolving with each shot. The ethereal collective tried the reality-warping weapons next. Beams of pure force that could unmake matter struck the void ships, but the organic hulls simply changed again. They became fluid, letting the beams pass through them without causing damage. When the attacks stopped, the hulls solidified once more. Zephyros, the energy being who had mocked human weapons just months before, watched in growing horror as his people's most advanced weapons proved useless. They're adapting faster than we can modify our attack patterns, he transmitted to the other commanders. Each shot makes them stronger. The Aquarian fleet launched their superheated water streams, but the enemy ships absorbed the heat and turned it into energy for their own systems. The draconian fire breath weapons met the same fate. Every advanced weapon system in the galactic arsenal was being countered and absorbed. Meanwhile, the Void Swarm began their own attack. Tentacles of dark energy reached out from their ships, grabbing allied vessels and pulling them apart. The organic ships fired weapons that seemed to eat holes in space itself, causing friendly ships to simply disappear. Within the first hour of battle, the Galactic fleet had lost a quarter of its vessels. Admiral Rodriguez watched the carnage. From the bridge of the UN's Endeavour, positioned safely in the rear with the other human ships. His tactical officer was pale as he reported the losses. "Sir, the Krillian Third Fleet is gone. The Ethereal Collective has lost half their constructs. The enemy isn't just winning, they're learning from every attack." Rodriguez nodded grimly. "And we're stuck back here, playing nursemaid to supply ships, while the real battle happens up front." That's when Captain Ryan Torres made his decision. His destroyer, the UN's Ranger, was technically under orders to stay with the rear guard. But Torres had been a Navy officer for 20 years, and he recognized a losing battle when he saw one. "Disengage from formation," he ordered his crew. "All weapons, prepare for attack run." "Sir," his weapons officer protested, "we're supposed to stay with the supply convoy." "The supply convoy won't matter if we lose this battle," Torres replied. "Besides, someone needs to test a theory." The UN's Ranger broke formation and accelerated toward the main battle. The human destroyer was tiny compared to the massive alien ships around it, but it moved with purpose. Torres had studied the enemy's adaptation patterns, and he had noticed something important. "Target the nearest enemy cruiser," he ordered. "Conventional missiles, not the fancy stuff. Let's see how they handle good old-fashioned explosives." The Ranger's missile tubes opened, and a salvo of simple rocket-propelled warheads streaked toward the enemy vessel. The Void ship's organic armor began to shift, preparing to absorb or deflect the incoming energy weapons. But these weren't energy weapons. They were hunks of metal filled with chemical explosives, guided by basic computer systems. When they struck the enemy hull, they exploded with simple primitive force. The effect was immediate and devastating. The organic armor designed to counter. Advanced energy weapons had no defense against simple kinetic impact and chemical explosion. The missiles punched through the hull and detonated inside the enemy ship, tearing it apart from within. On the bridge of the UN's Ranger, Lieutenant Sarah Williams stared at her tactical display in amazement. "Direct hit, sir." "The enemy vessel is breaking apart." "I'll be damned," Torres whispered. Then louder, "All tubes, reload and fire again. Target the next ship." Across the fleet, other commanders watched in shock as the tiny human destroyer accomplished what their massive weapons had failed to do. The enemy ship was dying, its organic hull unable to repair the simple, brutal damage caused by chemical explosives. War Chief Vexthara's compound eyes tracked the human vessel as it fired another salvo. How is this possible? Their weapons are primitive, basic, crude. Maybe that's exactly why they work, her tactical officer suggested. The enemy has adapted to counter our advanced systems. They've never encountered weapons this simple. The second missile salvo struck another Void ship with the same result. The organic armor, confused by weapons that relied on nothing more than Newton's laws of motion and chemical reactions, failed to adapt. The ship broke apart in a shower of debris. Admiral Rodriguez received the battle report with growing excitement. "Get me a channel to all human vessels," he ordered. "It's time to show these aliens what primitive weapons can really do." The UN's Defiance and UN's Liberty moved to join the Ranger, their missile tubes opening like hungry mouths. Across the fleet, alien commanders watched in amazement as the humans they had dismissed as harmless primitives began to tear through enemy ships that had seemed invincible. The tide of battle was beginning to turn, and it was being turned by weapons that any engineer from Earth's 20th century would have recognized. Sometimes the oldest solutions were indeed the best ones. Word of the human success spread across the galactic fleet like wildfire. Admiral Rodriguez stood on the bridge of the UNS Endeavour, coordinating the largest human military operation in history. For the first time since joining the galactic community, Earth's forces were taking the lead in battle. All human vessels. This is Admiral Rodriguez, he announced over the communication channels. Execute Battle Plan Alpha. Show them what we're made of. The 3 human battle groups spread out across the battlefield, their smaller ships moving with deadly purpose. The alien commanders watched in fascination as the humans demonstrated tactics they had never seen before. Instead of the formal, structured attacks favored by galactic civilizations, the humans fought with brutal efficiency and flexibility. Commander Beth Taylor led her fighter squadron in a strafing run against a cluster of void ships. Her pilots flew old-fashioned interceptors with machine guns and unguided rockets, weapons so simple that most alien races had forgotten they ever existed. The enemy ships, still trying to adapt to energy weapons that weren't coming, found themselves helpless against streams of bullets and explosive rockets. Fox Squadron, this is Commander Taylor, she called over the radio. Break formation and engage individually. These things can't adapt to what they can't predict. Her pilots scattered across the battlefield, each one attacking from a different angle with different weapons. Some used machine guns to rake the enemy hulls. Others fired rockets in random patterns. A few brave souls flew so close they could drop old-fashioned bombs directly onto enemy ships. The void vessels twisted and writhed, their organic armor trying desperately to find a pattern to defend against. But there was no pattern. Each human attack was different, unpredictable, chaotic. The enemy's perfect adaptation systems were useless against such random violence. On the ground, things were even more brutal. Colonel Kevin Baker's Marines had boarded several disabled void ships, fighting their way through corridors filled with cybernetic creatures. While alien soldiers struggled with energy weapons that the enemy could partially absorb, the humans carved through their opponents with assault rifles and grenades. Staff Sergeant Maria Lopez found herself trapped in a narrow corridor with her squad, facing a mass of writhing tentacles and glowing sensors. The creatures ahead of them seemed to be learning from each bullet fired, their bodies becoming more resistant with every shot. "Sergeant, our rounds aren't having much effect anymore," Private Wilson called out, reloading his rifle. Lopez looked at the explosive charges on her belt and made a decision that would shock the alien. Observers watching through security cameras. "Fall back 20 meters, she ordered her squad. "I'm going to solve this problem the human way." She pulled the pins on 4 grenades and held them against her chest, then charged straight into the mass of enemy creatures. The explosion that followed destroyed not just the immediate threat, but also damaged the ship's control systems, badly enough to disable the entire vessel. The alien commanders watching the security feeds were stunned into silence. The concept of acceptable losses, of trading lives for tactical advantage, was something their advanced civilizations had moved beyond centuries ago. But here was a human soldier making that calculation without hesitation. Did she just sacrifice herself to destroy the enemy? Asked Zephyros, his energy form flickering with confusion. "It's called tactical thinking," Admiral Rodriguez replied grimly over the communication channel. "Sometimes the mission is more important than individual survival. Your species seem to have forgotten that lesson." Captain Danny Cole was proving the same point with his heavy cruiser, the UNS Boston. His ship was surrounded by 3 void dreadnoughts, each one 10 times larger than his vessel. Instead of trying to fight his way out, Cole ordered a ramming. "Attack on the nearest enemy ship. All hands, brace for impact," he announced over the ship's intercom. "We're going to punch a hole right through their hull and detonate our missile magazine inside their ship." The Boston accelerated to maximum speed, its armored prow aimed at the center of the enemy dreadnought. The Void ship's weapons fired desperately, but they were designed to counter energy attacks. Not a 70,000-ton chunk of metal moving at high speed, the impact was tremendous. The Boston's prow punched through the organic hull like a spear, penetrating deep into the enemy ships. Interior. Cole waited until his ship was completely inside the enemy vessel, then detonated every missile and torpedo in their magazines. The explosion tore the Void dreadnought apart from the inside, its organic systems unable to cope with such simple, devastating force. The Boston was destroyed in the blast, but Cole and his crew had eliminated a target that had been shrugging off the most powerful alien weapons. War Chief Vexthara watched the destruction with a mixture of horror and admiration. Her own tactical philosophy had been built around preserving her ships and crew while defeating the enemy through superior firepower. The humans seemed willing to trade anything for victory. "Request permission to coordinate with human forces," she transmitted to Admiral Rodriguez. Her pride was shattered, but her respect for human tactics was growing by the minute. "Permission." "Granted," Rodriguez replied, "but you follow our lead. We know how to fight these things." The integration of human and alien forces created a devastating combination. The massive firepower of alien energy weapons, when used to support human kinetic attacks, proved incredibly effective. Human ships would use their missiles and guns to breach enemy defenses. Then alien vessels would pour energy into the gaps. Lieutenant Commander Amy Foster found herself leading a mixed squadron of human and alien fighters. Her old-fashioned interceptor flew alongside ethereal energy beings, an Aquarian biomechanical craft. The combination was strange but deadly. "All units, this is Foster," she called over the radio. "Human fighters will make the initial attack with conventional weapons. Alien units follow up with energy weapons through the breaches we create." The tactic worked perfectly. Human weapons would punch holes in the enemy's adaptive armor. Then alien energy weapons would pour through the gaps before the organic systems could repair themselves. It was a perfect marriage of primitive effectiveness and advanced power. As the battle raged on, the Galactic Fleet began to see the humans in a completely different light. These weren't primitive savages with crude weapons. They were warriors who understood the fundamental nature of combat in ways that more advanced civilizations had forgotten. The tide of battle had turned completely. What had started as a desperate defense against an unstoppable enemy had become a systematic destruction of the Void Swarm. And it was all because humanity had never forgotten that sometimes the simplest solution was the most effective one. The final phase of the battle began when the Void Swarm's mothership emerged from hyperspace. It was a nightmare made real, a vessel the size of a small moon, covered in writhing tentacles and pulsing with dark energy. The organic hull was different from the other ships, harder and more complex, as if it had learned from every battle the Swarm had ever fought. Admiral Rodriguez stared at the massive enemy vessel through the viewport of the UNS Endeavor. "That thing has probably absorbed the knowledge of 1,000 different civilizations," he said quietly. "It knows how to counter every weapon system in the galaxy." "Except ours," replied General Hayes, who had joined the fleet for the final assault. "It's never faced primitive weapons before today." The mother ship's arrival changed everything. Suddenly, the remaining Void vessels became more organized, more dangerous. They began working together in ways they hadn't before, as if the mother ship was coordinating their actions. The easy victories the humans had been winning became harder-fought battles. War Chief Vexthara's voice came over the communication channel, and for the first time since the humans had known her, she sounded humble. "Admiral Rodriguez, I formally request that you take command of this battle. My forces will follow human tactical doctrine." It was an amazing moment. The proud warrior, who had mocked human weapons just months before, was now asking to serve under human command. Around the battlefield, other alien commanders were making similar requests. "All alien vessels, this is Admiral Rodriguez," he announced. "We're going to hit that mothership with everything we have. But we do it the human way. No formal attack patterns, no predictable strategies. We hit it fast, we hit it hard, and we don't stop until it's dead." The assault on the mothership was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Human ships led the charge, their simple weapons punching holes in defenses that had withstood the attacks of entire civilizations. Behind them came the alien vessels, pouring their advanced weapons through the gaps the humans created. Commander Beth Taylor's fighter squadron dove straight at the mothership's surface, machine guns blazing. The organic armor tried to adapt, but the sheer randomness of the human attack made it impossible. Some fighters strafed from left to right, others from right to left. Some flew high, others skimmed the surface. There was no pattern for the enemy to learn. "This is Taylor to all squadrons," she called over the radio. "Pick your own targets, use your own tactics. The only rule is there are no rules." The alien pilots, used to following strict formation patterns, found this new freedom both terrifying and exciting. They began attacking in ways their military academies had never taught them, copying the human style of chaotic, unpredictable warfare. Colonel Janet Moore's Marines were leading the boarding assault on the mothership itself. Her troops had fought their way through dozens of enemy vessels, learning how to kill cybernetic creatures with nothing but rifles and determination. Now they faced the ultimate test. "Remember," she told her troops as they prepared to board the massive vessel, "these things are used to fighting energy weapons and advanced technology. They've never faced good old-fashioned human stubbornness." The Marines moved through the mothership's corridors like an unstoppable force. Their assault rifles and shotguns tore through enemies that had adapted to survive plasma bolts and disruptor beams. Their grenades and explosives destroyed systems that could repair themselves after energy attacks. The cybernetic creatures inside the ship grew more desperate as the humans advanced. They tried to adapt to the kinetic weapons, but every time they began to develop a defense, the humans would switch tactics. Rifles became shotguns, shotguns became machine guns became FLAMETHROWERS. Lieutenant Commander Amy Foster led the final assault on the mothership's control center. Her mixed squadron of human and alien fighters had fought through layer after layer of defenses, using a combination of primitive weapons and advanced technology that the enemy simply couldn't counterdot as they approached the ship's brain, a massive organic structure that pulsed with alien intelligence. Foster made a decision that would end the war. She loaded her fighter's last missile, a simple explosive warhead that would have been familiar to pilots from Earth's past, and aimed it directly at the creature's core. "This is for everyone who said we were too primitive to matter," she said, and pulled the trigger. The missile struck the organic brain with devastating effect. The creature had spent eons learning to defend against energy weapons, matter disruptors, and reality warpers. But it had no defense against a simple explosive charge detonating inside. Its most vital organ, the mothership's death scream, echoed across the battlefield. Every remaining void vessel suddenly stopped moving, their connection to their controlling intelligence severed. Within minutes, the entire swarm was drifting helplessly through space. The battle was over. Humanity had saved the galaxy using weapons that every advanced civilization had dismissed as museum pieces. In the aftermath, the Galactic Council met again in their Great Hall. But this time, Ambassador Lisa Carter sat at the head table, her position as an equal among the galactic powers finally recognized. The human military quota had been expanded to match their proven capabilities, and Captain Morrison, now General Morrison, wore the uniform of the galaxy's newest military advisors. The Council recognizes that technological advancement and military effectiveness are not the same thing, announced Zephyros, his energy form flickering with what might have been embarrassment. Humanity has taught us that sometimes the oldest solutions are the most reliable ones. War Chief Vexthara stood and formally saluted General Hayes. I request permission to send my officers to study at human military academies. We have much to learn about the fundamentals of warfare. The Draconian delegate, who had once suggested humanity be classified as a protected species, now spoke with deep respect. Perhaps we have been too quick to abandon the lessons of our past in favor of new technology. The humans have shown us the value of maintaining basic military principles. As the session ended, Admiral Rodriguez stood with Ambassador Carter, watching the alien delegates file out of the chamber. The conversations he overheard were very different from those 3 months ago. Instead of mockery, there was admiration. Instead of dismissal, there was respect. Amazing how quickly things change, Carter observed. Rodriguez nodded. They spent so long advancing their technology that they forgot the most important lesson. In warfare, it doesn't matter how sophisticated your weapons are if you don't know how to use them effectively. The greatest irony was that humanity's primitive weapons had saved a galaxy that had ridiculed them. The species that had been dismissed as too backward for military service now served as teachers to civilizations, millions of years older. Sometimes, Rodriguez reflected, the most advanced solution really wasn't the best one. Sometimes you just needed to remember how to fight.